for the town of Shelburne and ask you to stand, if able, for the presentation of the colors and the leading of the Pledge of Allegiance by Boy Scout Troop number 602.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please remain standing for the playing of our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, performed by David Connery.
retreat.
The honor guard is retreating. I'd like to share with you the members of Troop 602. Drew Bewley, Matt Ireland, John Curley, Garrett Potmeyer, Garrett Grundling, Matthew Connor, Dan Knight, Will Kallock, Fisher Irwin, Anders Erickson, Nicholas Russell, Alden Luft, Ethan Garrison, Charlie Schramm, Aidan Curley, and their Scoutmasters, Matt Luft, Gene Irwin, Jim Brangan, Dave Connor, Donald Curley, Kevin Potmeyer, and Dan Erickson. Thank you so much, and thank you to Dave Connery for that splendid performance. You may be seated. I'd now like to invite to the podium Town Poet Laureate Rick Bissett to read a poem he has written for this occasion and to offer brief reflections on the role of his office.
Good evening. Thank you, Select Board. Thank you, Tom. I wanted to let you all know I'm in my third year. and the Poet Laureate program is alive and well. I have a few things I'll mention. I'll try to keep them short before I read my poem. I wanted to let you know that I mentor here every Friday for 1 hour, fifth graders. I get a group every month. I get a new group of 6, sometimes 8. Every group gets a trip to Shelburne Farms to write. I work with Jensa Bushy, the literary coordinator for the school, and it is amazing what the children write. And I'm fortunate enough to get their work posted. Shelburne News has posted. The library. We'll go on to the next thing. So Jensa Bushy is going to take some of the students' work and deliver them to the governor of the state of Vermont, Phil Scott, on March 27th to show what Shelburne is doing with our young students. I partner with the Pearson Library. Kevin, I thank you and your staff. To work alongside them is an amazing and wonderful thing that I never dreamed possible. They're my support, they're my help, they're my go-to. I was approached by our new Lieutenant Mike Thomas from Shelburne Police. Shelburne Police would like to put a poetry board in the police department to build a relationship with the young students of this town for all to see. And I thank Mike for that. I will be giving a presentation. I was asked by Kevin. I'll be going before the librarians of the state of Vermont at UVM to talk about the mentoring program we do here in Shelburne to get children to write, and of course the Poet Laureate program, in which I am very, very honored to hold this, and as far as we still know, I am still the only one in the state of Vermont. And so it is my goal to spread this news across the state of Vermont, to have librarians work with someone in the community to build relationships and to get kids' work out and just to be a part of the community. April is National Poetry Month. I'm scheduled to read at the Arbors, where I try to go twice a year. And the staff in there brings out pretty much everybody that's a resident there. And it's truly rewarding to give something back. And we'll have another event sometime in April to celebrate National Poetry Month. So tonight I've written a poem. It's called The Heart of Shelburne, The Parade. In 1784, a sailor moved to town, an unbroken wilderness, swamp and frog pond year-round. True pioneer and settler, with future visions he planned, he gave our town the parade, where together we now stand. Here militia once gathered, school children on this green played. Multi-purpose gatherings are common ground still today. Our Veterans Memorial, our Scouts too. A gift from a man with a dream. Captain Harrington, we thank you. The parade was gifted by Captain Harrington, April 1807. The information was gathered by Mr. Truman Webster, a native of Shelburne, and his work was published in a volume titled The Shelburne Pieces of History, published in 1994. And from what I understand, David is working on getting some more of those reprinted. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for this position. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'd now like to invite to the podium Jim Brangan and Colleen Haig to present this year's recipient of the Colleen Haig Award.
Right there? How do you want to do this? We're going to dance a little bit before we get started. Had to drag Colleen back up to the podium. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, members of the Select Board. Thank you, Lee and Diana, who worked so hard to put this together. I also want to thank the custodians of Shelburne Community School. They're working shorthanded tonight. You could hardly tell. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to get together. Shelburne is an inspiring place. I mean, look at this room. It's full of people. It shows us that we have a community that's invested in itself, that we have a community that cares. I'm here with Colleen, the namesake of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award, to recognize someone who rolls up their sleeves and gets things done in our community. Back in 2016, after Colleen retired from 35 years of continuous, professional, and faithful service, the Shelburne Select Board put out a call to recognize one of its own with an award to present to someone who, by his or her actions, exemplify the spirit of public service, who has shared their time, talent, and energy for the betterment of our community. Someone who inspires purpose, who drives for lasting solutions, someone who makes a difference. Last year, the Select Board asked me to chair the Haig Award team, to review nominations for this award and to choose someone who makes a difference. I have to tell you, it was an unbelievably humbling experience. Luckily, I had help. Bud Ockert and Lisa Merrill agreed to serve on the team of this extremely difficult task. Thank you for your help, Bud and Lisa. Your input really was invaluable. Thank you. This year we had 7 nominees for the award. Before I share their names, I would like to recognize the people in the room, this very room, who make a difference. Did you know that Shelburne has no less than 20 commissions, committees, or boards? From the Bike and Pedestrian Path Committee to the Water Committee, our town has hundreds of volunteers working towards making Shelburne a better community. If you serve or have served on one of those 20 committees, please stand up. Don't sit. Hold on. If you have served or served on, if you've served or served on Shelburne Rescue, please stand up. Is the fire department here? Oh, there they are. Ladies and gentlemen of the fire department, please stand up. If you volunteer in any capacity in our community, it doesn't have to be on a committee or a board or a commission, please stand up and be recognized. We have a lot of Boy Scouts, assistant scoutmasters, and over in that corner there, they're not going to stand. Let's give them a round of applause anyway. And let's not forget our outstanding town employees. The town of Shelburne has a fantastic group of people. Please stand up and be recognized. Don't worry, we're not going to make the select board stand up, but thank you very much for your time and service to our community. I mean, take a good look around. These are our neighbors, our friends, our relatives who are working together to make Shelburne a better place. It's really an amazing thing, the amount of volunteerism that goes into this community. Okay, on to our nominees. The following individuals were nominated for this year's Colleen Haig Public Service Award. In alphabetical order, these nominees are Gail Albert. Are you here, Gail? I know Rick Bissett's still here. Is Peggy Coutu here? Roz Graham, you were here earlier. Joan Lennis. And Kathy Townsend. Is Kathy here? Thank you all very much for what you do. You really, truly do make Shelburne a better place to live. You're making a difference. Now, on to this year's winner of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award. We received many nominations for this individual. You probably know this year's winner. If you're sitting here, you know this year's winner. He can be seen around the village mowing grass, shoveling snow, always helping neighbors in need. He was born in 1938, just down the road in New Haven, Vermont. He worked on his family's 38-head dairy farm for 20 years. He served in the United States Army for 14 years. He's a lifelong Red Sox fan. Nobody knows more about the Sox than this guy, I'll tell you what. He moved to Shelburne back in 1967. He graduated from LaSalle University in 1974. He worked for 42 years at Hulbert Supply and never once called in sick. Kind of makes me feel guilty. He's a member of St. Catherine's Church, where he has been, and I quote, an unstinting volunteer in every way, where assistance and attention is needed in keeping the church trim and safe. He's been doing that since 1967, the same year he joined the fire department. He's the longest serving member on our department. Tonight is the 51st year he's carried the microphone at town meeting. That alone is remarkable. He was married to his beloved wife, Edith, for 50 years before her death in 2016. He raised 3 children, Cullen, Rosemary, and Linda. And we're lucky to have Cullen here with us tonight. And this is someone, I just have to say, who is someone who absolutely rolls up his sleeves to get things done. Without further ado, I'll let Colleen announce our winner.
So, excuse me. So the winner of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award is my very good friend and fellow churchgoer and all-around good guy is Cullen Bullard.
I think he wants to say a couple of words. Come on up, Colin.
The only thing I've got tonight, I can't have the white.
Here,
I lost her.
here, Cullen, bring it.
The only thing I've missing, and we was married 5 years, well, been 50 years. And she worked at Kmart 24 years. And we did a lot of things together. And we've been to Kansas, we've been to Massachusetts, we've seen baseball games, we've seen football games. And I went to the UVM game with Middlebury. The last game I had, Middlebury beat Vermont 7-6. And I thank you so much, everybody.
picture of you with the award and follow me.
Thank you very much for your different darling. Yeah.
That's a tough act to follow. I'll note that this year's town report is dedicated to the volunteers and donors who helped bring the Newtown Library project to fruition and who, with an anonymous benefactor, raised $1 million for the project. And copies of the report are at the check-in desks and on our website. I'd like to introduce a few people at the outset. Diana Vachon, our town clerk, up here with me. Dave Connery's already been introduced. Again, thanks, Dave, for your performance of the national anthem. Jerry Story and the select board. Jerry will make those announcements in due course. Lee Crone, our town manager. And just note we have some displays out in the hallway. The tree committee, the fire and rescue departments, the veterans committee, and the Shelburne Historical Society. We are voting on some items tonight, and when I call for a vote tonight, you use your green card for a yes and the salmon card for a no. I've got a couple of questions about the school meeting. This is the second year where we have essentially only a town annual meeting since there no longer is a separate school district that meets together with the town. In 2016, we abolished the standalone Shelburne K through 8 school district and transitioned into a standalone combined unified district with Heinsberg, Charlotte, St. George, and Williston. But we will be hearing from Dave Connery on the Champlain Valley School District budget a little bit later on. Robert's Rules of Order apply this evening. One person alone may have the floor at a time. If you rise to ask a question, please let me know, and please phrase your question in the form of a question. Once recognized, wait until a microphone is handed to you. Colin Bullard will be in charge of the microphone, so please wait and wave your hand or otherwise get recognized. And we have a backup for Colin. Matt Vachon will be also running mics. Please listen respectively when someone is speaking and treat that speaker as you would want to be treated if you yourself were speaking. If you have a question about parliamentary procedure, the form of a motion, et cetera, please address your question to me. If there are any votes tonight that are too close to call, I will appoint, I will either call for a vote by division, by people standing and sitting, or by paper ballot, and we'll appoint tellers if we go to paper ballots. I'd like you to consider a special rule of order limiting each speaker to not more than 2 minutes and not permitting a speaker to be heard a second time until all who wish to speak a first time have been heard. Is there any objection to proceeding with that 2-minute limit? Seeing none, that's how we will proceed. If a question raises a point that can best be answered by someone here tonight but who is not a town resident, at that time I will ask if there's any objection to having that person speak for the limited purpose of answering the question. And I'd now like to turn the floor over to Select Board Chair Jerry Story to introduce the rest of the Select Board. And then we will turn to page 11 of the annual town report and go through the first 3 articles on that warning. Jerry?
Thank you, Tom. Good evening. Welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues. Colleen Parker is our longest-serving member. Jamie Hines, who additionally serves as vice chair. Mary Kehoe and Josh Dean, who concludes his 3-year service tomorrow. We're honored to serve you.
Article 1 of the warning is to hear and act upon the reports of the town officers and the auditor's report for the budgetary period July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2018. In other words, FY 2018. You'll find the auditor's report at page 63 and the officer's reports starting at page 37. Does anyone have any questions on any of those reports that you would like to address to the select board or through the select board to anyone of the town staff? Seeing none, the question is, shall you approve the reports of the town officers and the auditor's report for FY 2018 as printed in the annual report? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, please raise your green card. Okay, thank you. Those opposed, raise your salmon card. The ayes have it, and you've adopted Article 1. Article 2, will the voters determine the compensation to be paid to the Select Board for fiscal year 2018-2019? The warrant article proposes a $0 compensation. And I would note that the current and past salaries have been, for the chair, $1,500, and the other members, $1,200. Jerry, does anyone on the Select Board wish to address this? Or not?
We need to make a technical change in the article so that the fiscal year reads 2019-2020.
Okay.
If it can be amended with the favor of the...
Jerry Story moves to revise Article 2 to clarify that it is for the fiscal year 2020, which is July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Are there any questions about what the motion is? The motion is to amend Article 2 to strike fiscal year 2019 and replace it with fiscal year 2020. And we're voting not on the article, just on the motion to amend the article. Yes, could you wait before we get a microphone? Colin? Okay. And please introduce yourself.
Article 2 looks like it's worded correctly, but Article 1 looks incorrect, so it's just a technicality. Article 1 looks like it's referencing 2018.
No, Article 1 is correct, because we're looking at last year's
okay.
reports, and I may have simply been reading it wrong on my notes up here. Could you flash it back to Article 2? Yeah, I think I misspoke, and we don't need a motion to correct Article 2. My apologies. But at least now we know how to make a motion and a second, right? So are there any questions about the substance of Article 2? The Select Board is proposing that its members receive no compensation for the upcoming fiscal year.
Will someone kindly explain why we're eliminating the pay? Is it a budget issue?
When you're using the mics, you really need to get it right up close to your mouth.
Test.
Would anyone on the Select Board like to respond to the question? Is why is this being proposed to be no salary? Is it a budget issue?
So this proposal was unanimously accepted by all members of the Select Board. In respect to all the departments in the town, we asked them to make some fairly dramatic cuts and to try and keep our rate of increase for taxes for all the citizens in town to an acceptable level or a more acceptable level. And it didn't seem fair to ask them to make the severe cuts that we were asking them to make without making some of our own. You know, I don't think that anybody on the Select Board does this for the pay. We do this for the love of Shelburne, and so there wasn't anyone that sat today that wouldn't be willing to do it without that pay.
Are there any other questions, or does anyone else wish to speak to the article? Yes.
So I think I was the last person to suggest a raise, which might have been 10 years ago now. And I did that after doing some research on the other towns in Chittenden County and what they paid people. And we were actually pretty far below that. Most other towns pay some nominal amount. It's not a lot of money. But the reason for that was it recognizes that it is a lot of work and that some people actually need childcare or maybe dinners or just something that would make it easier, and it attracts a wider swath of people perhaps to the role. So I thought it was appropriate to up it at the time, and maybe, you know, $100 a month is not much money to the people serving now, but it might be for people who decide to run who need, you know, a dinner out or babysitting or something like that. So I think we should keep it to what it is.
Anyone else right here?
Question: if the body here were to vote no on this, is there a provision for the current salary for the Select Board to remain the same as it has been?
I believe the answer to that, Gail, is no. That this is an item that needs to be voted on annually, one way or the other, to either set no salary or to set the salary at some specific
So as it
dollar
stands,
amount.
if we were to vote no on this because we wanted to retain the salary of the Select Board, their salary would still be zero?
As a matter of parliamentary procedure, if there's probably more than one way to do that, but one way would be to move to amend the article to put a dollar figure in and have a vote up or down on the amendment, and then take a subsequent vote on the article either as amended or as not amended. If you simply vote on the article and the results of the vote is a no vote, the question has been decided in a negative, and I might need to consult with another lawyer about that, but without an affirmative vote on a warrant article to set a specific salary, there would be no salary. So I think if someone wishes to get a salary number in front of the town meeting, they need to make a motion with some specifics in it. Anyone wish to speak, raise your hand or stand. The question on the floor is, will the voters determine the compensation to be paid to the Select Board for FY20? And the warrant article proposes a $0 compensation amount.
Having had any questions, I would propose to amend the article to retain the previous year's salary for the Select Board. Is that sufficient?
It is. A motion is on the floor to amend the article to propose the current fiscal year's salaries for FY20. Is there a second to the motion? The motion has been seconded. So the motion, the amendment is on the floor. Will you debate it? Does anyone have any questions about it? Does anyone else wish to be heard? Are you ready for the question? Okay, let's try this again. All those in favor of the motion to amend the article, please raise your green cards. Okay, thank you. All those opposed to the motion to amend the article, raise your salmon cards. Okay. Thank you. The ayes have it, and you have amended the article to replace the $0 compensation with the $1,500 for the chair and $1,200 for the other members of the Select Board. The question now is, shall you adopt the resolution, the article rather, as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, all in favor of the article as amended, please raise your green cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your salmon cards. The ayes have it, and you've adopted the article as amended. Thank you. Article 3 is to transact any other business properly to come before this meeting, and we will take Article 3 up after we have completed the presentations and debate on the 5 other articles up for vote tomorrow by Australian ballot. Article 4 is to elect all town officers as required by law. Town meeting moderator for a 1-year term, a select board member for a 2-year term, select board member for a 3-year term, and a Champlain Valley School District school director. Michael Ashew is running for the 3-year term on the Select Board. Jamie Hines is running for the 2-year term on the Select Board. Tom Little is running for moderator, and Russell Caffrey is running for the CVSD school director position. Under the Vermont's town meeting law, questions and debate are not in order on this article, which takes us now to Article 5. Shall the town adopt the Select Board's proposed budget of $9,548,668, of which $6,788,734 is to be raised by taxes? We vote on this tomorrow by Australian ballot. You'll find the proposed general fund budget starting at around page 13 of the town report. And the Select Board will now make a presentation on the budget. For that, I turn the floor over to Select Board Chair Jerry Story.
Good evening and welcome again. We extend our hands to those of you who have joined our community in the past year. We especially welcome you and invite you to take full advantage of the opportunities to serve all of us as the great number of volunteers have stood in our doing. And in a quiet moment, each of us in the next day or two can remember those who have passed, friends, family, neighbors, and others who have been lost to the community. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce the board, and especially in this case to Lee Crone, the town manager, and Peter Frankenberg, our finance director, who are going to step you through the budget presentation. You're more than welcome and invited definitely to ask any question you wish, and we are all prepared to respond to them.
Thank you. So, as many of you know, the budget process is a fairly extensive one here in Shelburne. The board, department heads, committee, and staff put a lot of time and effort. The process begins in late summer, looking at the capital plan, which are the largest expenditures for large or long-lasting items, and then we work through a whole host of elements to get us to where we are today. So Kevin, if you could please. So as noted, we have a total expenditure proposed budget of roughly $9.5 million, roughly $6.75 million to be raised by property taxes, and the rest through other sources. The select board worked very, very hard this year to try to keep the budget increase to a reasonable number. The nut, as the chair referred to it throughout our budget conversation, was the unalterable challenge that we had roughly a 4% budget increase before we even looked at any department heads or other requirements or requests. The reason for that had to do with fixed debt that we as a community have taken on, collective bargaining agreements, and other municipal needs. Really wanted to keep this under 5%. So the base budget comes in at a 4.38% increase, balanced in some respects by grants and other external revenue, and a roughly 1% growth in the grand list. So total expenditures increase roughly $750,000. On the expense side, it's an 8.7% increase in spending, again balanced by an increase in the grand list, which is how the actual tax rate does not increase by that much. We can go to the next one. One of the drivers this year also had to do with stormwater, and we're all aware of the requirements imposed upon us by state and federal agencies to improve how we handle stormwater. Presently, that's still handled on the tax rate, and there's proposed a roughly $65,000 increase in expenses for the next fiscal year. That doesn't come close to what the water quality superintendent believes we actually need to do, but again, trying to balance external needs and the needs of the taxpayers to keep things on a reasonable basis. Moving right along, over the past several years, there's been an incremental change in where the cell tower revenue comes from. Many of you may know that there's a variety of cell towers and infrastructure on our south water tank near the Shelburne Green development on the south end of town. And those funds have slowly over the years been transferred more and more to the water department, which really bears the cost of maintaining that tank. And that was the reason for that. The next slide shows in concept form, and again, I thank Peter Frankenberg for his extensive work on the numbers and the charts. This shows in concept form where we are with long-term debt. We are almost at the peak of what we know to be our present or anticipated debt. That will continue to be high for at least the next year or two and then start to drop off. It's high this year and next due to principal and interest payments on the library and town center project. So again, we're trying to keep that in check, but these are fixed debts that we have, as a community, have voted to take on. This slide, town budget overview, it just shows tax rates of where Shelburne is in relation to other communities in Chittenden County. As you can see, we are the third lowest tax rate in the county. among these comparable communities. And the last slide is an overview. It shows the base budget as we have proposed, and then it shows the additional articles that get voted on separately, the $35,000 for the Open Space Fund, Article 7, and Article 8, the fire rescue property matter that has been discussed in very recent times. Open Space Fund, the vote there will be whether to fund that at a $35,000 level. That's a decrease from prior years. And then the new element is $25,000, which would be from municipal taxes. The other $25,000 would come from the rescue department's ambulance fund, but the tax impact would be $25,000 if that article were to be approved. So this chart basically shows what those very small incremental increases would be to the total budget if they are both approved. It would drive the municipal tax rate to a 5.31% increase. So the Select Board did achieve its goal, keeping the base budget under 5%. These additional two articles would be add-ons if voted by the voters. And I think that's the basic presentation. Of course, we're happy to answer questions. Again, the next articles are as discussed and will be on the ballot and Australian ballot tomorrow.
Are there any
Thank you.
questions about Article 5, the town side of the budget, for the presenters? Okay, seeing, yes, there is.
Hi, Gail Albert again. And I just would like to say on behalf of the Open Space Fund that we use those monies to be able to maintain the tax rates at a lower level for the town, because when we do have an opportunity to conserve land that perhaps will help with our stormwater mitigation, maintaining forests, maintaining the open space and the quality of life here. And we do collaborate with other organizations that provide the bulk of the monies for that. When we do take the monies from the Open Space Fund, which we put in incrementally every single year, there is no long-term debt imposed on the town. The money that we have is money that's actually earning interest until we spend it. And the town has been really supportive of this in the past, and I hope that we'll find that kind of support coming back to us again today. And I thank you all for maintaining Shelburne the way it is.
Thank you. That takes us to Article 6, which happens to be the article for so shall the town raise by taxes the amount of $35,000 for the purpose of obtaining options and or the acquisition of lands or the rights in land which would preserve open space and natural resources, any unexpended portion of the such sum to be placed in the Open Space Fund, which I think the fund balance as of last June 30th was just over $171,000. Does the Select Board want to make any presentation on that, whether anything is in the pipeline or anything is under review? Or if not, okay.
I think Gail is the resident expert and has just given a number of reasons as to why she feels this should be supported, and I think the rest of us agree.
Okay. Okay. Are there any questions, or does anyone wish to speak to the $35,000 item for the Open Space Fund?
Does this work? Thank you. Paul Reese, it's my first rodeo here, so I'm
apologize if this is getting too into the weeds, but why 35,000? Why not 32 or 40? It's a question for you.
It's a nice round number.
Thank you for the question. We all know what the price of land in Shelburne is. When we do have the opportunity to conserve a piece of land, the first thing we do is work only with willing landowners so that we're not going in sort of taking people's land from them. The second thing that we do is we encourage those landowners to work with a national organization or a third-party organization that has access to much greater funds than we do. And so what often happens, and there are just a couple of instances in which we've purchased land outright as the town. Most of the time when we've had the opportunity to conserve land, we've worked with an organization like the Nature Conservancy or the Vermont Land Trust or the Lake Champlain Land Trust, who produce the bulk of the monies and also have the opportunity to preserve that land in perpetuity so that it can't be changed by a zoning change by some future select board or a future developer who really wants to have it. So that gives us the assurance that the money that we're investing for purposes that we believe are really important are invested well and invested forever. I don't know if that answers your question. The $35,000 is generosity, I think, on the part of the select board this year. It's not and hasn't been for many, many, many years what we have asked for in hopes that we would be able to conserve pieces of land that we would love to conserve here in the town if they were to become available. Most of the time, properties that become available take years and years to conserve. Often there are family issues, there are negotiations with land trusts, and prices often go up during that period of time. So we try to anticipate so that we don't have to come to the town with a bond issue. We ask for what we think would be a reasonable amount, knowing that the deals that we're negotiating at any given time are generally kept confidential until they're made public and until they're sort of sealed. So we often ask for a lot more than we're given, and the town has worked really hard with a lot of support from the members of the town who vote, and 35 is what we've got. Thanks for the question.
Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 6? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 7. Shall the town of Shelburne establish a reserve fund to be known as the Fire Equipment Reserve Fund to be used for purchasing new or replacement fire department equipment and/or vehicles in accordance with Title 12 Vermont Statutes Annotated Section 2804. Is there a presentation on this from the Select Board?
Thank you. This is somewhat of a technical question because creating a reserve fund, which is really a savings account, requires the approval of the voters. The reason for it is severalfold. First, by way of background, the original request of the fire department in the capital item was for over $100,000 of needs that the department felt it had. As a part of the overall budget cuts that we all went through, that was cut to $50,000. Fire engines and fire equipment are very expensive. And so the whole purpose of this is to create a savings account just like we would do for our homes. If we know we need a new roof on our home or some other major expense, we try to save some money in advance so when we get to that point, we maybe don't have to borrow all the money we need to purchase that. We already have reserve funds for other expensive equipment such as highway equipment, ambulances, police cruisers. So the notion here was compromise, if you will, we cut the fire department's request from over $100,000 to $50,000, and then the suggestion to create the reserve fund so that money can be placed in a savings account and over each year, not unlike the open space fund, start saving money toward those very expensive capital purchases. Because the alternative is the risk of the so-called use it or lose it approach, which doesn't always make the best use of our important tax money. So again, it's simply creating a savings account, taking the $50,000 that's in the budget, it's not an add-on, and saving it for when it's actually needed.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the presentation, or does anyone want to speak to Article 7? Okay. Seeing none, that will take us to Article 8. As a reminder, when you get your, if you haven't yet voted, when you get your ballot tomorrow, Article 8 is on the back side of the ballot. You have to turn it over and to get to that article. And Article 8 reads, shall the voters of the town of Shelburne appropriate $25,000 subject to receipts of grants in aid, coupled with a $25,000 contribution from the town ambulance fund for the same purpose, to 1, enter into a purchase and sale agreement for a portion of Lot 6 of the Rice Lumber property on the southwest corner of the intersection of Shelburne Road and Long Meadow Drive, and 2, determine the suitability of the site for a future fire and rescue station, with the work being undertaken jointly with Road to Hana Inc., DBA Healthy Living Market and Cafe, which currently holds an option to purchase the property and intends to use a portion of the property for its own facility. There's also a note attached to the article, which I also will read. I don't know if that's available on the screen. Okay, I'll read it. The total of up to $50,000 is a maximum dollar share of the first $100,000 in joint costs, with the other $50,000 to be paid by Road to Hana Inc., DBA Healthy Living Market and Cafe, over the next 12 months to analyze, subdivide, and otherwise permit development of the property as steps in determining its suitability for both healthy living and a fire and rescue station. Should the site be determined to be suitable, this activity contemplates a town vote at next year's annual town meeting to consider purchasing the lot at a cost not to exceed $650,000 and pay additional site-related costs subject to terms and conditions of a letter of intent between the town and Healthy Living, which has been made available for public review. Is there a presentation on this from or on behalf of the Select Board?
In addition to the information that is summed in the article itself and the note, and anticipating there will be questions and suggestions from some of you tonight on this, I thought to add one understanding. This process is a 3-stage process. The first stage is for for the town to determine that it wishes to go ahead with a year of activity which will result in a decision that the site in particular is suitable. That means it can be permitted, it's sound environmentally, there are no hidden disasters or catastrophes underground or above and such. That kind of study, in the sense of prudence, has to be accomplished for any purchase of land for construction and investment. We're sharing that cost with the current option holder. And part of our agreement is that we will be able to secure an option to purchase the site, should it be suitable, in the following year, that is March of 2020. So the second stage is should the town approve this expenditure, should the site be determined suitable, we will approach you again next March with a proposal to purchase, actually acquire the site. That purchase price, as well as additional costs representing further development, have been negotiated and at this point are fixed and will be incorporated in a formal purchase and sales agreement should the town approve this article tomorrow in the next few months. Once the town, if it should, approve acquisition, the third and final stage, which is several years off at best, would be to plan and ultimately construct a new facility. So this is a step-by-step process that we hope is not confusing, and that we feel in presenting the article is a diligent and responsible way to address what is a very late arriving opportunity for the town to our budget process. We welcome any number of questions you have, and thank you for your consideration.
Jerry, I have one question of clarification on the note that I read, which says at next year's town meeting, there could be a second vote to consider purchasing the lot at a cost not to exceed $650,000. Is that anticipated cost for the subdivided lot that the town might choose for the combined rescue and fire
Correct.
station? So that's not 650 for both?
No,
It's
it would be
650,
for the portion the town has determined is suitable and is agreed to.
Got it. Are there any questions for the presenters, or does anyone wish to speak to Article 8? Got a couple over here on my left.
Chris Parlin. I am a new resident to Shelburne, and in that
Could you get the mic real close?
In that regard, defer a great deal to those who have spent a lifetime or many, many, many years here. I see this as presenting us with a Hobson's choice. To me, it seems undeniable that fire and rescue need and have needed for years new facilities. My concern is that a healthy foods, healthy living will have a deleterious effect on local stores. Second, I am very concerned that Shelburne, at least the northern part of it, starts to look more and more like South Burlington. We moved here rather than South Burlington for just that reason. Third, concerned at the spillover traffic on Spear and Dorset. I don't know how one, assuming one agrees with my concerns, I don't know how one gets them addressed, whether it is appropriate now or at some later time. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to ask a question or to speak?
Andrew Cate, quick question. I understand that the $650,000 is what the town would pay, but do we have a number on what the option is for Healthy Living to pay for the total package and what percentage that is? And has due diligence been done on both of those numbers, the $650 and if that's a fair price, and the total? And actually, side question, if there were a no vote, is there a plan going forward if that happened?
So I'll try to dissect those several questions. Healthy Living has an option on the entire Lot 6 for $1.6 million. The price fixed at this point, if the purchase were to happen, was negotiated significantly downward from the original asking price. By way of comparison, for example, my understanding is that sites like Yankee Doodle are on the market for roughly $750,000, and that doesn't include the cost of demolition or other types of site work. So this was felt to be, at least based on an informal analysis, a very fair price for the property. As for a plan B, if you will, if none of this moves forward, I'm sure that Fire and Rescue will have to regroup with the Select Board and figure out a next course of action. Just by way of historical reference, though, there was a site analysis done by the Fire Department back in 2007, looking at a number of sites on the Route 7 corridor, the southern end of that corridor where Fire and Rescue both feel is the ideal location. This site was identified in 2007, long before it was ever known to even be a dream of availability, as the #1 site. So the reason I mention that is not to advocate for this, but just by way of historical reference, that this wasn't just an item that, you know, somebody's dangling something in front of the town and we should jump on. It actually had a fair bit of historical reference and study.
Excuse me, Tom.
Some years ago, I recall a discussion during the playing fields issue that either the town or the school district owns some land in that general area. And I don't know whether that's still the case or whether I'm confabulating that and imagining it. But at the time, there was some discussion of moving the playing fields to that area, which was owned by one of those two entities. And I wonder, does anybody have any recollection of that?
I think we do, and I'll just say, when you're using these mics, it takes just a moment for the connection to click when you start talking, so make sure that you introduce yourself after we can start to hear you. Thank you. David.
If I follow your advice, okay, now I can hear my voice. My name is Dave Connery. Up until a few years ago, I was the chair of the Shelburne School Board, and when we transferred to the Champlain Valley School District, there was a period of time where we investigated doing something with the land that the school district owns, which is just north of the self-storage facility on Shelburne Road. There's two problems with that facility. One, it's set far back. The school's property doesn't start until after the trees, but before the cliff that forms the higher ground near Spear Street. Second thing is there's an awful lot of wetlands back there, so it'd be difficult to develop. The third thing is when the land was purchased by the school district, there's a significant amount of legal language in the deed that it can only be used for educational purposes. I would love to have it be fields that kids could use and play games upon. And truthfully, when I was thinking about this, I thought the same thing. It would be great if we could drive a fire truck or a rescue vehicle down there. It would just require more money than the school district wanted to invest to change that deed. But if someone would be willing to undertake that from a legal standpoint, that would be another option. But that is the background that I have. I think I've answered your questions.
Excuse me, Tom. Tom?
I'm sorry, Jerry. Go right ahead.
I wanted to respond to the gentleman previously who asked the question about Plan B. No, and I'm going to ask you to stay with me on the point that we're not advocating, promoting, lobbying for this article in what I'm going to say. But this opportunity arose quite unexpectedly in the very last month of budget. the current option holder is anxious to purchase and start construction, which it has advised us it will do on the lot of its choice, should the larger lot be split, and gave us the opportunity for a year to do as has been proposed. That is, to share with them so-called soft development costs to determine if this site were suitable. If either the site is not suitable, if the town does not approve this article, all of this stops then and there. And Healthy Living, to the best of our knowledge, proceeds with its plans to initiate construction of a new store next March, and will sell, as we understand it, the remaining portion of the lot to somebody else. So there's no backup plan, because there's no backup plan. That's difficult for all of us, given the late entry of this to budget, and given the fact that on the other end, it's a do or not. But that's a straightforward answer that, again, I hope you don't interpret to mean an advocacy for the article.
Thank you, Jerry.
Calvin Karlhuber, and I have a question. If the firehouse moves there, is it going to be closer to more houses, and how is it an ideal location?
Chief, we may.
The reason we've chosen this site is we base our responses on getting to all parts of Shelburne in a reasonable amount of time, or in the same amount of time. That location, the area between the Jug Handle and Longmeadow, gets us to just about anywhere in Shelburne in the same amount of time. It's almost like right in the middle of the actual town of Shelburne, not necessarily the village, but it's actually the middle of the town of Shelburne. It gives us better access to Route 7, both north and south. It gives us access to the eastern part of town by going up Webster Road. It also gives us access to both ends of Bay Road. So the location itself is ideal because it allows both agencies to respond better to Shelburne. There's been some questions about the traffic issues there. We have the ability through the state to manipulate traffic through traffic intervention. We can put lights on the lights that allow, so when we're responding to a call, the lights will turn red in every direction but ours. So it'll be green for us. Every other bit of traffic will stop, and then we can make traffic move as we wish. So that's the reason why that's the perfect site for us. There were 7 sites that we looked at over the course of that little range of land. 3 of them are no longer available. Of the other 4, 3 of those would have to require a lot more work as far as traffic cuts, acquiring land, removing buildings, so it would be a lot more of an expense to the town.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Kate? Coming up on your right.
Ross, Calvin's mom. My question, Chief, is growing off that question, are the calls that the fire department has equal in number in the more dense area of the village, Wake Robin, Harbor Road, Bay Road, or is there really a split in the way? It does seem like a central location, but are the calls actually that split?
I'll answer the fire portion. I'll let Chief Leopold answer the rescue. For fire, it's not necessarily whether it's getting to where the calls are the most, it's getting to the parts of town more easily. Where we currently are, people responding to the station from the north deal with a great deal of traffic. It takes them longer to get to the station. It's going to be the same way going the other way. You're still going to have the people coming from the south. We'll have to fight the traffic. But the important thing to remember for us is that it gives us the accessibility to get to where we have to get to faster. Responding from the village center getting onto Route 7, getting through the intersection with emergency apparatus has always been a huge issue for us. With the amount of pedestrian traffic, car traffic, the amount of events that go on here in the summertime, it just creates a huge congestion area for us. Getting in and out of that area safely is just an issue. So the area behind the Rice Lumber Lot, it would be a direct shot to Route 7. There would be no it's not going to be in a housing area. It's not going to be an area where you have a library, a school, and ball fields and stuff like that. So it's less congested for pedestrian-wise. It's less congested traffic-wise. But I think Rescue would want to deal with it.
Jake Leopold, Chief of Shelburne Rescue. Right now, the geographic distribution of our calls is primarily north-south along the Route 7 corridor, with lesser call volume along the eastern and western portions of the town. So the priority for Shelburne Rescue is being able to get out on that Route 7 north-south corridor. As for whether or not it's located to the density of town, it's simply not, because that's not really a large residential area for the town. We obviously focus on the larger senior living communities and the neighborhoods which are not really located in those areas. Also, we don't have so much the issue of responding to the station, since Shelburne Rescue is primarily manned right now. Most of the time, our staff are at the station, and so we're just simply trying to get out the door within a few minutes of time and get to 7 so that we can travel either north or south as needed. So this is a prime location for that reason as well.
Anyone else have a question or wish to speak to Article 8? Seeing none, that takes us back to Article 3, which is other business, properly to come before the meeting. Is there any other business? And I'd remind you, before you pack up your bags, we do have the Champlain Valley School District budget presentation coming up. Seeing no other business to come before the meeting. I'm sorry. No.
Ken Albert, I just wanted to acknowledge and maybe thank, very definitely thank the retiring select board member, Josh Dean, for his service, and commend and thank, I think on behalf of a lot of us, the willingness of Jamie Hine to throw his hat into the ring again and go for another term, and also to thank Mike Ashew for his willingness to serve on the board. I think it's an extremely important kind of position to fill, and I would just urge other people here and other members of Shelburne, the next time a board position comes up, consider it, and consider throwing your hat in the ring. It's a wonderful way of serving the town, and it also makes a great deal of positive difference to the town.
Thank you, Ken. I had in my notes to see if Town Manager Lee Crone had any brief updates on progress on the library project and and the stormwater projects. Lee, do you want to say?
Thank you. Take them in reverse order. With regard to stormwater, as many of you know, quite a bit of work was done in the past year toward the possible formation of a stormwater utility. And the reason for that was to try to share the costs across all landowners, including those who don't presently pay property taxes. That ordinance was not adopted last year, and one of the primary goals and objectives for the board and for me is to continue that work this year. We must get more work done on the stormwater management issue. With regard to the library, if you've been on town campus recently, you've seen that there is significant and dramatic progress. Externally, the shell of the building is up. All of the concrete floors are now poured, and considerable internal work will now begin very shortly, building walls, putting up all the electrical equipment and HVAC type units. There's also been quite a lot of work done on historic town hall, much of which was not necessarily planned at the outset, but which needed to happen. So a lot of energy efficiency work, drainage work. The basement will now be dry. The heating and cooling systems will be much more efficient. And again, lots of work going on there to make that building more useful for all of us. I'm also pleased to note that we will be installing solar panels on the roof of the library, which will help generate some electricity. And assuming a successful contract outcome, we'll also be engaging in what's called a power purchase agreement with a company that has off-site solar arrays up to the state limit of 500 kilowatts. This town uses an enormous amount of electricity due to our many facilities and the fact that we have 2 wastewater treatment facilities. So by being able to purchase power at a 12% discount for the next 25 years up to that 500 kilowatt amount, we'll be saving the town several $100,000 over the lifespan of that contract. So thanks to the library folks who initially helped make sure we had a design for a roof that could accommodate solar panels, we're now going to go well beyond that and help us all save money for 25 years on power bills. So lots of good work happening there. And we are back on track, hoping for a late summer grand opening of the new library and historic town hall.
Thank you, Lee. I'd now like to ask Dave Connery to come to the podium. For this portion of our meeting, again, our same debate and questioning courtesies apply, Robert's Rules of Order, et cetera. We will not be voting on any school-related questions tonight, but we will have a budget presentation on the CVSD budget. The annual meeting of the CVSD was held earlier today at 5 o'clock at CVU. David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tom, for the assistance here. Let me get to my presentation. I want to thank the town for allowing me to speak tonight. I know that we're no longer a town school district, but I believe it's important to keep this community connection, and I hope long after I'm gone as a member of the school board that other members will continue this and you as residents will insist upon it. So tonight what I'm going to do is go through a high-level description of our budget, and I'm totally grappling with the fact that this microphone is really long and my vision is poor. I apologize. I welcome any and all questions when I am done with this. But to just give you a brief overview, we're going to go through some of the folks that helped us develop this budget, talk about enrollment, our goals, the key budget items, go through some of our budget factors. I'm going to go through the articles that you're going to vote on tomorrow, and then go through the all-important tax calculation and implications. So we can go to the next slide. For those of you who are new to town, I welcome you to Shelburne and welcome you to this still new to all of us Champlain Valley School District. 2 years ago, we merged Williston, Charlotte, Heinsberg, and St. George, as well as the Champlain Valley Union High School into one district. As you can see here, we now have 3,815 students, which I believe is at or near the largest school district in the state. We employ 415 teachers and a total of 900 staff. We have a school board of directors of 12 persons. In Shelburne, we have 3 members. Barbara Martin is one of our members right here in the crowd. If you just raise your hand. Barbara is a second-year member on the board. We also, another Shelburne resident is Russ Caffrey, who could not be here tonight. Shelburne has 3 members. Heinsberg has 2 members. Charlotte has 2 members. Williston has 4 members. And St. George has 1. And this is all based on proportional representation based on population. Every year I put up the mission statement, and I know anybody who works in corporate governance sees a mission statement and says, yeah, I had to check that box so that I can get my QS 9000 certification. I believe this mission statement is important because for folks like me who are in their 50s, they look at schools now and they look dramatically different. This mission statement does not say you will memorize your math multiplication tables up to 9 in less than so many minutes. It does not include spelling tests called out explicitly. It calls out some of the basic behaviors and skills that students of today are going to need to succeed in the workplace of tomorrow. So I really feel that our school has its eyes on the prize for the kids and teaching them critical skills. I love seeing the things that my kids are doing in school and the conceptual learning that they have even at the youngest grades. I think my kids were solving word problems in 3rd grade. Would you agree with that, Peg? You know, it's pushed way, way down now. It's amazing. I want to thank many of the teachers and support staff, including Peg, who works in the school now, and many others. I have Scott Sevo, our head principal, main principal, middle school principal. I forget which title you have now. Jack of all trades and all-around great guy, who's here. Kate Cross was here. She was one of our budget buddies we encourage citizens to be part of the budget process and invite them in to attend our budget meetings and take part. And this year, we only had 2, but I would encourage, if any of you are curious about that, next year when the call comes out, or put a calendar reminder in your phone for next September to contact me. It's great to have citizen input from parents and non-parents as well. So the next slide is points of pride for Shelburne Community School. This is a distillation of many, many, many things that we could put on this slide. It sort of shows a broad sampling of the things that Shelburne is great at. Our middle school girls cross-country team, state championship, work by teachers and students for COTS, Shannon Baird and Sharon Davidson's work on global goals at the Vermont Fest. Digital citizenship for 5th graders. This is so important for kids to learn how to be good digital citizens at a young age, so they can grow up and use all the tools available to them for good and to benefit themselves and not make mistakes. Fit Kids Morning Movement. I think this is a great way to get kids to school, get them breakfast, get them moving, and get them ready for the day. So much research shows that these types of activities are wonderful for helping learning. And then also our diversity and inclusion work group continues work, where citizens came to us 2 years ago when we were still a Shelburne board and raised some important issues with the school and the school environment, and it's very encouraging to see that still going. Moving on to CVU, points of pride. Again, so many great things. Teachers being awarded, students being featured on national radio and TV. The student Milo Kress came to us and talked to us about, if you were here when Chris Pearson was here talking about contracts you sign, Milo came to us and talked to us about all the little bits of software that you use in school where, you know, volunteer for this, sign up for this. What's the thing when you, well, there's some, like when a teacher needs volunteers to cover different activities, there's a certain website you can go to. He pointed out that, yes, they protect the students' privacy rights when you sign up for that, but they still sell the parents' information when you put your email in that. Totally changed the way I evaluate all privacy policies when my kids' work came home. But anyway, huge digression. But these kids are amazing. Also, Special Olympics, CVU raising $50,000, which I think was part of the Penguin Plunge. For those of you new to town, CVU absolutely destroys all schools in the state for the number and amount of donations that they raise. I love this line where CVU girls cross country won a trip to nationals in Oregon. They didn't just win a trip; they won New England's, as you know, and then they won the state for multiple times. So they earned a trip to nationals. It's a great thing. Excellent work at the Essex Tech Center, and then also the continued focus on what are our kids doing next? Are they succeeding? And if you look at where they go after school, 76% of them are moving on to higher education. I really don't think the 2% number here is correct. I think that's a typo. But if it is, I thought it would be higher, but I apologize. Moving on to the next slide, we're looking at SCS, Shelburne enrollment. It goes up and down by a percentage point here and there. For next year, it's projected to go down about 12 students. All of these numbers are subject to three big variables. One is we can't always account for kindergartners who come to school. Not everybody's in a child care program that reports. Two, there's a lot of kids that show up in first grade who attend other kindergarten programs. And three, kids moving in and out that arrive later in the summer. And there's the projections that we have. There's projections that are usually a few years out, and they look at birth numbers and moves in and out of Chittenden County. Those I feel have a pretty significant swing. When we do our budgeting, we do have a certain amount of risk mitigation built in to try and account for projected swings in population and in student attendance. The next one is the district as a whole. You can see that, yes, it's come down in the last 8 years from 4,000 down now to a projected number of about 3,800. That number is coming down as seen in a trend throughout the state, which is what many people like to talk about. This number is coming down at a much lower rate, however, because we're in Chittenden County, and so it is a slightly different demographic. If you look at these numbers district-wide, all of these are sort of the same thing. Some towns are going up, like Williston, Heinsberg going up a little bit, Charlotte amazingly going up a little bit. I don't know where these people are going because there's no housing in Charlotte, but I can say that because of the Shelburne meeting. But again, it's all up and down just by a small percentage points. The reason why we look at enrollment is because enrollment is tied to how many classes we have. We have quality standards in place through the state for what our class sizes need to be. They need to be less than 20 in K to 3 and less than 25 in an average for 4 to 8. As you can see for CVSD, all of those numbers are well below, and the ranges across all of them are low as well. They're below the targets. Shelburne has had 5 kindergarten classes and 5 first grade classes okay. All right, so we have had a 5th kindergarten class for many years, but next year we're going down to 4, correct? So it'll be 4 across the board. So that is based on projections of what the incoming kindergarten class will be. There have been years, I remember probably 6 or 7 years ago, after many years of class sizes for an entire grade being between 70 and 80, there was a grade that suddenly showed up and there was 105. So you couldn't do that with 4 teachers. And and we had to add a 5th teacher. And you see those bumps go through as the kids move up a year. It's good to see that we have pretty consistent class sizes now where we can maintain 4 teachers per grade. Academic performance, we look at the SBAC results, which are English language arts and then math. This eye chart here we want to concentrate on is the green bars that are on the lower end, which show that Shelburne is above the state average, or at or above the state average in all cases, and above average in most cases. There's a few small spots where it's grade 6 math and grade 3 English language arts where the numbers are close. But in general, it's good to see that the performance reflects the excellent instruction that our kids are getting. The CVU results, all above average for SBECs in the 9th grade. And I don't believe the science numbers, well, the science numbers aren't in here, but again, excellent performance by the kids. By no means are these tests the be-all and end-all of all evaluation of our kids. It's good to get objective data as a piece of that. If anyone wants to see the best 2 days or 2 hours of the example of our kids, I would encourage you, if you can fit in here, come to middle school graduation on June 13th at 4:30 to see all the kids that are moving on to CVU. And then if that is not enough, the very next day at around noon, go to Patrick Gymnasium at UVM and see the CVU seniors graduate. And you can put your hand over your heart and say, oh my gosh, I think we're gonna be okay, because these kids are amazing. I've been to that graduation many times. It gives me great joy to speak at it and address it, because it really is a great sight to see these kids that, you know, maybe some of them we've seen come through Shelburne when they were kindergartners, and here they are standing in front of possibly 5,000 or 6,000 people and speaking in concepts and ways that I would never be able to speak myself. But it's great. Excellent work by the school district. The next slide, we start to move from achievement into process. And this just sort of outlines what our budget process is. One of the great things about being a consolidated district now is we have better ways to leverage resources across many different areas and evaluate the performance in the different schools financially and operationally to get all of our resources in line. So we start by, in the summertime, of looking at how we did in the 4th quarter. And then in the fall, we start doing community forums, looking at the governor's goals for what they want our budget to be. And into the fall and into the winter, we do budget development. And that's where I encourage folks to become budget buddies if you're interested. We meet 4 times in November and December to go through each major portion of our budgets, which are special education, general instruction, operations, and then a 4th meeting to summarize all 4 of those and refine any changes we need to make. And then we spend from the end of December and January to now communications on what our budget articles are. I think some of you may have seen many of the articles I put on Front Porch Forum. I'm trying to describe each individual article over the last week. And then we transition into the spring, where we start with goal development for our budget for the next year. You know, we passed this past budget, what questions came up? What can we do to improve for the next year? So we are guided by these 5 goals. I think I've summed a lot of these up. Looking at our mission and vision, meeting or exceeding the educational quality standards, implementing new key initiatives. I know one of those examples is giving administrators and staff the tools to implement the new ways we evaluate students. It's not number grades anymore. But that's an example of a giant key initiative that we have, that they have. Implement and continue to improve the budget process and try and learn and make it better, because managing $77 million isn't something all of us do. It's a new process for us. And we are constantly focused on delivering this at a cost that you will support. So we move to the next slide, which shows that for the next year, our proposed budget is $78,900,000. This number is an increase of 2.7% over last year, and the cost per equalized pupil is $16,071, which is an increase of 2%. Both of these numbers are above or below, not above, sorry. They're well below the numbers that the governor and the finance office projected. They were projecting that budgets would be up about 3.4% on average. So we knew that number when we were going in, and we were looking for ways to try and beat that. Some of the big drivers for the 2.7% increase were salary and benefits for staff of $1.3 million, an increase in special ed and student services that were being delivered of about $500,000, operations and maintenance of $142,000, and then other mixed costs of lower numbers totaling $300,000. Through I think this is our third budget as a consolidated district, we've accumulated, we were able to accumulate for this year $331,000 in savings, bringing that total increase to $2 million. So this slide is basically putting together all the inputs from the budget process to determine the tax rate. I won't pretend to know all the details of each individual number here, but what's key is to note that by driving our spending per equalized pupil down, the statewide yield number then, that affects the district spending adjustment, which goes directly into the equalized homestead rate. So if you took our budget, applied it to a number of spending per equalized pupil, divided it by the yield, your equalized homestead rate would be $1.51 per thousand. We still have an incentive from the state for merging. We're down to 6 cents. We started at 10. We went to 8 in the second year. In the third year, we're down to 6. So your adjusted equalized tax rate is $1.45 per thousand. We then apply CLA, which is a way of the state measuring the distance between what houses are selling for on the market versus what their assessed value is. I think I'm at a pretty reasonable high level. Peter's giving me the nod on that. And so when we consider what this does is it tries to correct for distance from your appraisal and then sales of properties outside of market values. And that goes into the denominator so that if as you get further away from your assessment, your tax rate starts to get affected. The good news is, because of our CLA this year, your tax rate for schools is coming down by $2.78 per 100,000. So it's relatively flat. It's not a huge increase. It's not a huge decrease, but it's pretty flat. And it's nice to see that that number that way. You can see relative to the other towns, there are some that are up and some that are down. And again, Williston continues to be the most tumultuous tax environment for, seeing that $35 number, which. So the articles you're going to vote on tomorrow, Article 7 is the budget, which are the numbers that I just presented to you. It'll tell you what the total number is, what that increase is, and then what the cost per equalized pupil is. I think this is pretty straightforward. Article 8 is our fund balance. Every year, we've been lucky enough to finish in the black for our proposed budget, and so we have money left over. And so our fund balance generally tends to increase. We apply some of that to the current year's budget to reduce the tax rate. And then we assess how much money we truly need to have in the fund balance. Is there any way we can do that? Is there any place we could put this money? So what this article is asking for is $500,000 of the fund balance applied directly to the budget to reduce the tax rate. And second is to take some of that fund balance and put it into $1 million fund for construction across the entire district. This would leave $1.8 million in our fund balance for future years. We're going to gradually draw that balance down to keep it at 1 million for the future. But we don't want to take it all down at once. We want to draw it down slowly. I will say that this $1 million is an excellent idea, and I can give you $9.2 million reasons why that's a good idea. And this is a step towards what many asked when we asked for you to support the 9.2 million bond for the school. This allows us to have money in a place to address required maintenance across all the schools in a much more planned and orderly way. And that way we won't have large bond votes like 9.2 million for the school like we did a few years ago. There will still be bond issues, but less than what we've asked for previously as more maintenance does come up, because there are issues in Charlotte and Heinsberg that need to be addressed, and they may not be able to be covered in the future by the construction fund. And then Article 9 is the classic upgrading our school bus fleet. Hopefully, is it bus F that we need to work the most on? Is that the one I get the most calls in the morning? The district tries to keep the average bus age at about 8 years and purchase single-digit numbers of buses every year to replace aging buses. You know, the average age is 8 years. There's 62 buses in the inventory. There's some buses that are new, and there are some buses that are getting close to 20 years old. There was a document that came out, I think it was the flyer that y'all received in the Shelburne News, which said we had 562 buses, which would be one bus for every 8 kids. That was a typo. I apologize for that. I think my favorite text message this week was, do we really own 562 buses? You may qualify for education property tax adjustment and a relief on your property taxes on a sliding scale if your household income is less than 147. You can contact the tax department if you have any questions about that. I encourage everyone to get out and vote if they haven't already voted early. And polls are open tomorrow from 7 to 7. Tom's getting up, which by Tom getting up does not mean that you are discouraged from asking questions. Okay.
Do you have any questions about the Champlain Valley School District budget presentation or wish to speak to it? Right here.
I'm just curious about the ridership on the buses. When I see the lineup of cars with people driving their kids to school, I wonder if when you're looking at purchasing new buses, you might be looking to smaller, more efficient vehicles.
So the transportation issue is extremely complex, and I think you know that. One of the things that the operations department tries to balance is the length of routes and tries to maximize the number of kids that are on buses. Those are at odds. We try to minimize the amount of time that kids are on buses. We try to pick kids up last in the morning, but unfortunately they're dropped off last in the afternoon. So we would love to have short lines at school and short bus rides. I've lived in 2 different countries, many different states, and the school run absolutely stinks no matter where you live. It doesn't matter. There's always a ton of people that want to drive their kids to school at the last minute, and there's really nothing we can do to combat that. The last bus census I did see, there was like 40 to 50% of the kids are on the buses, which I think that's great. That is great. If we went to smaller buses, that would be a wonderful option. The only problem is if you have smaller buses, you would need more of them. And right now it is so difficult to find bus drivers in this state that if you go to the Burlington Farmers Market, there is a booth there advertising for sign up here to be a bus driver. So that is an example of how, there's so many complex things with transportation. We're doing the best we can. And I think that it's really hard to be super innovative as a school district, because I'd love to be innovative on teaching math and do pretty good at buses. And I think that's what we're doing. We're really trying hard. We've done some really involved transportation studies, and that's going to continue. And I love questions about buses because I get them every year, and I totally hear what you're saying, and we're trying to do the best we can.
You just have to unload those other 500 buses. Any other questions on the school district report presentation? Dave, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Yep.
I believe that completes our business, and a motion would be in order to recess the town meeting until 7 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, March 5, 2019. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. While you're thinking about that motion, I'd like to thank in advance our town clerk, Diana Vashon, and for all of the volunteers and workers who have been working a lot of hours getting ready to vote, processing the absentee and early voting ballots, and who will work long hours tomorrow. So thank you very much for all that, Diana and your team. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor of recessing until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, please say aye. 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 Opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and we are in recess. Thank you.